Hi everyone, I'm just trying to get this to work. I hope you'll have a little patience with me. Maybe? Hi everyone, I'm just trying to get this to work. I hope you'll have a little patience with me. But why? I can see that I can see that a few of you are already here. Can you just let me know if you see the whole screen or not? Or if you just see like a corner of my screen? Varför går det inte fram? Just a corner of the screen. But why is that? Okay, thank you. How about now? Do you still only see a corner of it? But why? Still just a corner? Oh my goodness. But why is that? Okay. Hey everyone. I'm just trying to get this to work. It is a little difficult. I'm doing this for the first time, so bear with me. I have tried to learn how to do this and I tested it earlier today and it worked. So what's going on? Oh my. Okay. Okay. So I'm trying to get this to work. And I do apologize that it is taking me a while. But welcome everyone. Let me see if this works. I have another screen going here on the side where I think I see what you see. But I am not an expert in this, so maybe I have done something wrong. I prepared a presentation with a lot of slides and a lot of photos and etc. So I'm trying to make that work. But I don't know, it doesn't seem to be working. An expert in this, so maybe I have done something wrong. How do I get that away? I prepared a presentation with a lot of slides and a lot. Maybe just that. Photos and etc. So I'm trying to make that work. Perhaps I fixed it now. Doesn't seem to be working. You live and you learn, right? So I'm just a potter and I'm trying to learn all this technology as well. And yeah, I do have a bit of challenge there. Did it work? Perhaps I fixed it now. Nope. What is going on? You live and you learn, right? So I'm just a potter. And there's a little bit of a delay on this. So, how do I do this? Okay. I think I'm gonna have to call my husband because he is a bit better at technology than I am. Just a second. That's a great start, huh? I see the whole screen. You see the whole screen, yeah, but do you see this blue thing in the middle? He didn't pick up. I wanted this not to be there. I see the whole thing. Okay, shit happens. Yes, it does. It truly does. Because on my screen I see everything the way it's supposed to be, but not here. Hej skat. Har du mulighed for at komme og hjælpe mig? Fordi at den driller lidt. Tak skal du have. Okay, help is on the way. I don't know whether he can fix it, but maybe he can. Now I see it all. Now I see full screen. I see the whole screen. But do you see, when I look at the screen, I also see like a black box and then with some blue in it? Or do you see my actual presentation? Okay, help us here. Maybe. Okay. So here, this is, jeg tager den lige på dansk. Her, den her skærm fra det der program bliver ved med at være oppe. Hvor er den? Der er den. Selvom jeg har klikket den ned.
Okay. Yeah.
Så jeg ved ikke, om jeg kommer til at lave et eller andet.
Nej.
It's okay. I see the black box. Okay.
tilføje, kan være her?
Det er bare Mac Screen Capture. Det er som om den er blevet trukket hjem. Okay. Well, now that my husband, he's trying to fix it, let's just start. Can I can I get you guys to just let me know where you're checking in from? Does it work?
So, no.
No.
There's no way to get that presentation working right now,
Okay.
unfortunately.
Okay.
So you have to go without presentation?
I'll do it without the presentation, and then I will leave the presentation somewhere so that you can see all the photos and everything afterwards, and then we'll have to do it like that. I'm sorry guys, I'm gonna have to improvise a little. Okay. I hope that you can see me now. So let me just see. So what we'll cover today is I'll do a quick run through of the videos that I sent you yesterday and today, and I will give you some glazing tips and tricks from my own experiences, and we'll go through how you can do glaze combinations and how you can layer glazes and how you can sometimes get an indication of how the glazes will react without having to test them all. And we'll go through some glaze flaws. We will talk about a case from one of you that sent me an issue they had, or she had, so we'll do some troubleshooting on that, and we will talk about clay bodies and glaze behaviors. So yesterday I sent you a video. I sent you a video on how you can change or how you can multiply the glazes that you already have by testing, and why you probably don't need more glazes right away. You probably just need better ways of testing them. In the video I go through how you test glaze layering, how you test overlaps, and how you test glaze thicknesses, and how you can actually control your glazes if you get to know them better. For instance, glaze thickness, well, that has a lot to do with how the glaze will actually turn out, and if you do effect glazes on top. If you do the thickness, or if you know how your glaze will react once it's layered thin or thick, then you can start designing glazes intentionally and using that as a means of creating some texture or creating some depth or creating some effects in your glaze. And today I sent you a video from my glazing masterclass, which was a video about how to glaze close to the bottom, even with runny glazes, because you can sometimes do that. You just need to know your glazes and know how to use them in order for them not to run, or how to control that. And that was today's video. In that video you also were able to see some of the ways that I use brush-on glazes and how I apply them to get great results. Because when using brush-on glazes, well, they need to first of all, you need to stir them up really nicely, and you need to check the consistency. With Bots Glazes, that's this glaze brand, they are a German glaze brand. With them, all the glazes, the consistency, it needs to be like cream. So is it thicker than cream, then add a bit of water and stir that up. Is it thinner than cream, then leave it overnight. Take a sponge or a syringe and take away a bit of the water, because all the clay or the glaze particles, well, they will settle at the bottom of your piece. And then the water will be at the top, and you can take off some if you added too much. And then when you apply the glaze to your bisqueware, then you need to clean off the bisqueware with a damp sponge before applying the glaze. Then I always, or almost always, go for 3 coats of the glaze that I am glazing with. For some cases where I'll be using Bots Plus, the effect glaze on top, then I will only do 2 layers, but mostly I do 3 layers, even though I do Bots Plus on top. But not when it's close to the bottom like this, because Bots Plus, the effect glaze, will make glazes run. An effect glaze often has a lot of flux in it, and fluxes, they make the glazes melt at a lower temperature and creates more movement in the glazes, and that's often where you will see some really cool effects. So what we'll be doing today is we will be going through what is really nice about glazing, but also what is really, really challenging about glazing. And I will show you some tips and tricks on what you can do with glazes and what actually makes it a little bit more fun when doing it, when controlling it. So for instance, a glaze design like this one is often a bit hard to make using dipping glazes. Now, can you just check in the comments? Do you mostly use dipping glazes, or do you use brush-on glazes? Let me see, you're from the US. I see the whole screen, including your black box. Hi from Montana. Ah, from the mountains of Norway. Hi, hi, welcome til. And we have some from UK and Germany and Sweden. Oh, how nice. And Poland, the US. Nice. Hey guys. Okay, so do you mostly use brush-on glazes or dipping glazes? I hope, can I just ask you a question? Do you see me now, or do you still see a black box? Because someone wrote that they saw a black box. I hope that's not the case. So you use brush-on glazes, dipping glazes. I use brush-on glazes, nice. Okay, so it's a little bit of a mix. Well, if you've worked with dipping glazes, then normally what you do is you dip your piece, and then let me just see if I have one here. Yeah, let's take this one. So you dip your piece, and then if you want to layer it, then you dip it again in a different glaze, and then you can get effects like this. But controlling the design and having like a gradient design, that's a little bit more tricky. It's not that tricky, but a little tip is you can use painter's tape. You will find out that painter's tape is my favorite tool in the studio. So what I do to make cups like this with dipping glazes is I just add some painter's tape to the top, go all around. Now this is just a quick demo. Add it all around, and then I dip the thing or the whole piece into my glaze up to here. I often do a painter's tape here at the bottom too, and then I dip it in the first glaze, and then I remove the tape, and then I dip first to here to where the other glaze is, and then afterwards I dip it all the way down to create this effect where the two glazes melt into each other, but at the top it's only the white glaze, whereas at the bottom here it is my copper green glaze from Cerama, and then with the white glaze also from Cerama on top. And right here it's actually the exact same glazes that I used, but they were just applied in two different ways. So here it was the copper green and then the white all the way on top. But you can see that you get two completely different results depending on your method of dipping. And this is the exact same way of glazing it, but here on the top and on the inside it's a cream crystal white glaze, whereas this one is the white shiny glaze. But same method, same way of doing it, just two different results. Another tip, if you really want sharp glaze lines, then what I do is, again, my painter's tape, I will add that to the bottom of my piece. And in order to have the same height every time, so that my cups are uniform and they have the exact same look every time, then I've made this little piece out of Legos. So I take my Legos and just use a regular pencil. Then I take my bisqueware, I place that on the table and place it up against the pencil, and then turn the piece around. Not this. This I keep steady, but I turn that around and it gives me a perfect line that where I can align my tape up against. And this way I always have a completely level glaze line here at the bottom. And that can give me some really, really nice glaze lines. Normally I don't use wax as much. I do for some pieces, but mostly I just use my painter's tape. Another thing that I use my painter's tape for is when dipping things in a bucket, I do this. I take my painter's tape and I make a little handle. And right now I did it a little fast, but I think you get the point. And then I have a handle, because this way I can dip it without having any marks from any tongs or anything. You can also use a car dent puller to do this, but what you will need to do is you need to wax the bottom, because this piece won't stick to a bisqueware piece. It actually did stick to this one because it's a fired piece, but it is more difficult getting it to stick to this dusty bisqueware piece. So you can definitely use this and it works wonderfully, but then you need to wax the bottom. When waxing the bottom, I do recommend either using a sponge or using a brush. But when you use a brush, then do dip it in some dish soap before dipping it into your wax, because this way then all the wax doesn't get into those little bristles of the brush, and you can easier clean off the brush afterwards, and you will be able to use that brush for longer than if you didn't do the dishwash thing before. Yeah. Do I have some more tips? Yeah. So, stamping your pieces. Well, I always, more or less always, use what's called an underglaze stamp. I have my underglaze stamp pad here, and it is the one called the Potter's Pad. And I have a rubber stamp that I use. And why I like this instead of the regular stamp that you would stamp into the clay is that I'm not, then I don't need my piece to have a certain moisture in it. It doesn't need to be completely leather hard. It can be leather hard, it can be bone dry, it can even be bisque fired. And I won't have any issues with stamping. Another thing is, if it doesn't come out perfect, then I can just wipe off the underglaze and go again. And I don't have any issues if the bottom is thicker or thinner. It won't warp the bottom. It will just stay really nice. So that's another little tip. Okay, thank you. Oh, that's nice. So I'm here alone, so I'm trying to read all your comments alongside going through all of the tips and tricks. So if I don't see it, then just send another message or another comment, and I'll try to go through them again, okay? So I wanted to show you, or I wanted to show you a photo right now of a cup that Lila, one of you guys, sent me, and it was actually quite a really nice photo. But I'll see if I have a piece here instead with the same glaze flaw. Let me just check. I do and I don't. Okay, so this piece, hopefully you can see here at the bottom that the glaze is cracked. So what happened to Lila's piece is that she normally she throws her pieces and uses plastic clay, or she hand builds, and now she changed it up and started to slip cast. And since she has shifted to a slip instead of a plastic clay, then now she's suddenly experiencing the glaze flaw called crazing. So crazing is when the glazes crack and form these cracks in the glaze. And well, normally one would say that glazes with cracks isn't food safe, because in theory all bacteria from food and etc. can get into those cracks and can actually grow mold. And yeah, when you have pieces that crack, well, I personally still use them, because when you use them and put them in the dishwasher or wash them nicely, then this shouldn't be an issue. And I have pieces that I've used for years and they still are completely fine. But one of the issues that she has is she experienced that these cracks wouldn't form right away when she took them out of the kiln, but when she then pour in hot water, this would happen, and she would hear and see the cracks form. And I would love to have shown you the photos, so please, if you want to see the photos, please do go through the presentation slides when I send them to you. But in the photos you can also see that when she pours in the water, it forms like dark lines in between the cracks. And that tells me that probably the clay isn't vitrified. And what does that mean? Vitrification is the process that clay goes through where it has completed its chemical reaction from the heat and has transformed from fragile clay into a glass-like substance, and where water can no longer pass through the clay. Now, Lila, she is working at a lower temperature than me. She is firing to 1031 degrees Celsius. And I'm guessing that that is a, not a stoneware clay, but an earthenware clay. It's harder to get earthenware to be vitrified. That's just a fact. So it's hard to get them to be completely vitrified. And it is recommended that the clay you use for tableware, that it is vitrified. So the strictest or the most recommended vitrification is one where you have less than 0.05 or 0.5% water absorption in the clay. And you can test that by firing a piece of the clay that you use and firing it to your normal firing, and then weighing it before putting it into, so once you take it out, then you weigh it and note how much it weighs. Then you take that piece and you boil it for, I think it's 4 hours, and then you take it off, and then you take a damp sponge and just clean it off, and then you weigh it again, and then you calculate how much it weighs now after having been boiled in water. And you can then calculate how much water has been sucked up into the clay. And that number has to be, in the perfect world, that number has to be below 0.5%. Yeah. And well, the glaze or the clay body that Lila used, she fired it to 1031 degrees Celsius. But I did a bit of research, and the firing range that it is recommended for is between 1020 degrees Celsius to 1100 degrees Celsius. So it is quite a little bit of a wide range, and she is going almost to the limit of how low she can go with the firing. So the chances that that clay is not vitrified is pretty big. And when the hot water is then poured into the actual cup, then that gets sucked up into the clay. And what happens is the clay expands. And the clay expands more than what the glaze can do. And first of all, the cracks will probably come because there's a mix match, or not a match, between the glaze and the clay body in itself. It is when glaze and clay, they both have what's called thermal expansion. So they heat up. When they are heated up, they expand and contract at different rates. That can cause tension. So if the glaze shrinks more than the clay body, then you will see these cracks. That will happen. If the clay body shrinks more than the glaze, then you'll get the glaze flaw called shivering. Shivering is where you will see glaze just kind of flake off, or the piece will crack off. That's because of the tension in the clay body. So what you can do to prevent this is sorry, let me just. So what you can do to prevent this is, well, I'd recommend that the piece that she has, that she fires it hotter. And sometimes, well, the kilns don't go any hotter and you're firing to the max. But if it goes hotter, then I would definitely recommend that you do choose to go hotter. That would be good for the clay body and will actually also be good for your glazes, because the glazes that you used, or she used, that was a transparent glaze from Bots Glazes, and it was a glaze that worked for that firing range. But she also used Purite White, which has a firing range, a very wide firing range. It goes from 1020 degrees Celsius to 1280 degrees Celsius. And that's a little strange, to be honest, because a glaze normally matures in the last 100 degrees Celsius of its firing. So what I would think is that the glaze is not matured. So when a glaze is under fired, then you will often see it be, this is a very good example. Here you can see the glaze, it doesn't really look as though it melted all into each other, and it's a little matte. Whereas if it's fired correctly, then you get a more glossy finish, and it will melt into each other more. So my guess is that the glaze is also underfired. This is not pure white. It was just, I don't know which one this is. It doesn't matter. Yeah. What also happens when a glaze is underfired? Then it is less, it's a little bit more stiff, if you will. And what do I mean by that? I mean it's less flexible when it comes in contact with hot and cold materials. Then it is more likely to crack. A lot of the matte glazes that you will buy in the stores are sometimes actually just underfired high fire glazes. But because when you fire them at a lower temperature, the glazes will be more matte. So if you take one of your matte glazes and test it and try to fire it hotter, then what you experience sometimes is that the glaze won't start to run, but it will just become more glossy. And then it's probably because the glaze was underfired in the first place. Okay, let me just go through. Okay, so she's mentioned in her comment that the slip casting clay that she was using is a normal white slip casting clay, and I think she also mentioned it was the same one as the clay that she normally used. Well, I have two different clays. It's the same clay, more or less, but one is the slip casting version and the other one is the plastic clay. It is the one from Schneider, a German glaze or a German clay brand, and they are actually called 208, both of them. So it's the same clay, but they do react differently. They look the same, but they do react differently. They have different thermal expansions. They have different what do you call it, shrinkage rates. And the reason why, even though it's the same clay, the reason why you can use the same clay but have different issues with thermal expansion and glaze fit is because the glaze or the because the clay that is used for slip casting, well, they have a lot of additives in them. They have more flux, they have a smaller, often a smaller particle size. They have more, what do you call that? So more flux, particle size, and they don't have grog in it. Whereas plastic clay, they often do contain grog. And grog is fired clay that has been pulverized and added back into the clay. When you do that, it shrinks less, and it's better for sculptural things and so on. But it does add this feature that it shrinks less, and then it's, for instance, if you attach handles and so on, or attach a lot of pieces, then it's nice that the clay shrinks less, because then you have less issues with cracks and so on. So plastic clays with grog is often really good for a lot of things, for hand building and so on, whereas that's not a part of a slip casting clay. So that can be the reason why you're experiencing, or why she is experiencing crazing on her pots with the slip casting clay. Okay. A thing that if you have this issue, a thing you can try is you can glaze or apply the glaze in a thinner layer. Because when the glaze is applied thinner, then there's less tension in the glaze, so that there's less tension in the relationship between the clay body and the glaze, and there is then a better chance that it won't craze. If you like this look, then you can actually also get glazes that have this effect in it. Then the suppliers don't call it crazing, then this effect is called crackle glazes. And often you will then use a crackle glaze like I did here on the outside of a piece. Then it's still food safe, because I used a food safe glaze on the inside and on the rim, but at the bottom part I used this crackle glaze. I also had some questions. Okay, just, are you with me so far? Does this work now that you don't see the slides? I hope it's still interesting, even though it's just me. So just give me a thumbs up or something, so that I know that you're still with me and that it's working for you, even though it's this format instead. Okay, I see someone asked me whether I do dip or paint 3 layers on. I always do, well, when I use my dipping glazes, or I dip. When I use my brush on glazes, then I brush on the layers. I do also sometimes turn a dipping glaze into a brush on glaze if I want to do certain designs. I can also sometimes dilute a dipping glaze to pour it inside of a vase, for instance, and then pour it out, because it's hard to paint on brush on glazes on the inside of a piece. But most often than not, if I'm glazing a vase, then I would use a neutral glaze on the inside, a dipping glaze, and then do the brush on glaze on the outside and on the rim here, and then I would just remove some of the dipping glaze here from the inside, and then paint on the brush on glaze here at the top, so you would be none the wiser that there's a different color of glaze on the inside. Thank you very much. Hi there. I work with brush on glaze. Okay, I see a lot of thumbs up. Thank you very much. It's nice to see that it's working. Okay. I also had some questions regarding how to work with colored clay and what consequences colored clay could have. Well, colored clay sometimes if you use a black clay, for instance. Black clay is amazing. It looks wonderful. Oh, this is dirty. Well, nonetheless, black clay is really fun, and dark clay bodies, I really like this one too. It's a lava clay. But a thing to know about dark clay bodies is that it has an effect on how your glazes will turn out. Dark clay bodies, especially black clay bodies, they contain a lot of iron. And what iron does is it goes into the glazes and it reacts with the glazes. So it can often eat up some of the color of the glaze. So let me just show you a piece with the same glaze but on a different clay body. So this is a light stoneware clay and this part is the same glaze. So here you can see it. This glaze is called peppermint, so it has this nice subtle green peppermint-ish color. But when it is applied on black clay, then it comes out more sand colorish, and a lot of the green or shiny pepperminty characteristics of the glaze, they disappear. Now, there's a tip to that. If you still want those vibrant colors, then what you can do is you can apply a layer of ingob underneath. Ingob, that in Danish it's begitning. Ingobs, that's essentially colored clay. And here on the test tile, I just made it all the way up to here so that I could see that this part or this side was the one with the ingob underneath. The ingob then goes in and creates a barrier in between the glaze and the clay. So now the glaze will pop more than if it's painted directly on the black clay. That's a little tip that you can do if you still want vibrant colors. Okay. I also got a question earlier from one of you who said, how do I know if glazes will work together? Well, what I do is different things. And I'm a little confused whether she meant when putting together a glaze design, whether they will work together, the glazes. But what I do is I make I've made my glaze board. And I can then take off the different glazes that I feel might work well together. And then I can see them up against each other and thereby kind of get a feel if the colors work together. That's how I design most of my pieces. But when doing glaze layering, well, let me just show you. I have my line testers. I showed you that in video number 1. So here I do glaze layering tests so that I can see exactly how the glazes will work when they are layered on top of each other. And I made from this one, that's just 9 pieces of this, and then I had 16 glazes that I glaze layered tested. So first one direction and then the other. And from 16 glazes, I got 169 different glaze tests out of. So for half a day's work, doing glaze layering tests, I then have 196 different glazes that I can choose from, or where I at least know more or less how they will turn out if I combine those glazes. And if you don't want to test, well, then I don't always test. I sometimes just experiment, and I love experimenting, and I love opening the kiln and then just seeing what comes out. I do that all the time. But if you want to glaze 30 cups and you want to do the same glaze, then well, I do recommend testing it first instead of having 30 pieces come out of the kiln that are ugly. So then definitely go for the line test. But if you just want to play around and want to test your luck and see if you can create something beautiful and you don't feel like waiting, then there are a few indicators that might help you get more success when glaze layering. So, for instance, there are surface types that might give you an idea of how the glazes will work together. So if you do a matte glaze over a matte glaze, then what you'll probably end up with is a visibly flat glaze. So a glaze that has no depth in it. And I don't mean flat in like a negative way, but it will be more or less a solid glaze, even though it's layered. Here it's layered with an effect glaze, so that doesn't count. But if you layer a glaze like this with another matte glaze, then what you'll get is more or less of a solid color. Whereas if you do a matte glaze and do a transparent glaze on top, then you will get some depth in that glaze, because then the top glaze, the transparent glaze, will work together with the layer that's underneath, and that will create some interesting depth in your glaze. And if you do a shiny glaze, a glossy glaze on top of another glossy glaze, then you will often get what's called a stable glaze. So let me see if I have some here. I'm not sure I do, because I love glazes that have a lot of effect in it. But yeah, nah. But a glaze that not necessarily moves a lot and is more or less solid, but has a bit more fun in it. If you do a combination of a runny glaze plus a stable glossy glaze, well, then you'll have some really interesting effects. You can have the effect called phase separation. Here, this is actually a runny glaze on top of a matte glaze. And here you also see the phase separation. Phase separation is also what you see here. So phase separation is where you have two glazes in one, so to say. And then you have the glazes kind of, I don't know how to say it, but they're kind of competing about which glaze to show. So you see multiple colors in the glaze. And if you work with glazes that have some flux in it, so for instance honey flux and all of those, or if you use Box Plus, my guess is that Box Plus also has a lot of flux in it. Now I don't know the glaze formula, so I can't say for sure, but my guess is that it definitely has flux in it. And as mentioned earlier, flux lowers the melting point of a glaze, and makes them run more, and thereby they create this runny effect and they make them melt, and a lot of interesting things happen when you add a flux. So definitely worth doing. Also, if you have a piece where it crawled, well, then reglazing it and adding flux can save your piece. Okay, I'll just look. I can see that a few questions are coming here. I'll just quickly try and read some of them. Could you make slip casting clay by watering down ordinary plastic clay? When reclaiming clay from dry clay, would that make a difference regarding the glaze? Okay, so Karen asked whether you could make your own slip casting clay by watering down ordinary plastic clay, for instance, reclaim. Well, you can. It won't be optimal. You can definitely do it. I have done it. But it doesn't have the properties that a real slip casting clay has. One of the things that is with slip casting clay is the particles are, what do you call that? Floating in between the water. The clay particles are flat, and they're floating around inside water particles. In a slip casting clay, they add some additives that make the clay particles flow around in the liquid, but without having as much water in it. That means that when you pour in the slip cast into your plaster mold, then there's actually less water in a slip casting clay than there would be in a watered down clay. That means that it will, the mold will have to suck up less water, and you can do a more efficient casting of the clay, and you can use the mold more often, and it won't have to dry out as much before you can use the mold again. So that's one of the properties of a slip casting clay, and why those are better. You get a more uniform glaze, or a more uniform mold or slip casting piece out of it. But if you just want to do a few pieces here and there, then go for it. You can definitely do it. But if you want to do production of slip casting, then I wouldn't recommend it. Then going for the real slip casting clay is the way to go. You can buy that as a liquid where it's already been mixed up with water, or you can buy that as a powder and then add water yourself. And sometimes you need to add an additive as well. I'm not an expert in that. I haven't tried it myself. I only have the liquid kind, so I don't know exactly how to mix it up. I think you need like a big mixing machine as well. Yeah, but you'll have to look into that if you want to do production slip casting. But it is better for the planet if you buy it as a powder, because then you won't be shipping as much around, and all. Yeah, so it's just better. So go for it if you want to do production with slip casting. Then look into that, and it will also be cheaper, I think, because then you don't actually pay for shipping of water, you just pay for shipping of the material, and you can use the water you have yourself. Yeah. Okay, I see another question here. For vibrant colors on dark clay, you may use, as Trine said, white ingob slip from white clay, or made by pot ash clay powder, or white porcelain slip. Oh, nice. I would think that using white porcelain slip on a stoneware clay body might actually give you issues with thermal expansion. I haven't tried it myself, but I know that porcelain can have a different shrinkage rate and different thermal expansion than stoneware clay. So I don't know whether that would be the best way to go, but the other possibilities, yeah, Karen, I completely agree. Tak, Trine, for at forklare mye om slipcasting. Det var så lidt. You're welcome. Yeah. Okay. I had another question from one of you guys asking, when you make kiln cookies, how do you keep them flat when they dry? Often what you will experience when making kiln cookies is that they might curl up or warp during the firing process, or maybe even during the drying process. I made a complete guide of how to make your own kiln cookies, and I made a little PDF, and you can find it on my website for, I think it's about €5 or so. And in there, there's also a recipe on how you can make your own kiln wash for kiln plates. No, kiln plates? Huh? Kiln shelves. Yeah, that's the word. And it's a really good kiln wash. But let me just go through it real quick here. So when you roll up the clay, then roll it up to 6 millimeters thickness. So that's 1/4 of an inch for the Americans. Yeah, roll it up and then compress the clay. And what do I mean with compress the clay? Take a rib. If you have like a semi-stiff mud tool rib, that's I always use the yellow one, and then compress the clay. So go over it, add a bit of pressure, first in one direction and then the other direction on both sides. Then you have aligned the clay particles. So as I mentioned, clay particles are flat. So when they shrink, if you don't compress them, then one clay particle will be like this and another one like that. And when they shrink during the drying, then this one will pull that way and this one will pull this way, and that can create tension in the clay and make it curl. So by compressing the clay, then you align the clay particles so that when it dries, the clay will dry in the same direction, and that will keep it more sturdy and more flat. Another tip is I actually always dry my flat test tiles, or yeah, both my flat test tiles, but also my kiln cookies in between 2 layers of wood. So I put some newspaper and then I place the flat tiles, etc., on top of the newspaper, put another layer of newspaper, and then a board of some sort. And I just let them dry in between that, and they always come out completely perfect. And I use hexagon cookie cutters for that, because then I can align the little cookies really nice close up to each other, so that if a glaze runs or if a glaze spits or flakes off, then I don't really have that much of my kiln shelf free for the glaze to actually get stuck on. And I do have kiln wash on both my kiln shelves and my kiln cookies, so that if a piece, let me just see here, if a piece is stuck to the kiln cookie, then I can often just click it off. Here, this is an old kiln cookie. That was before I actually used kiln wash on it. So there you see it clicked off, but I ruined the pot because a lot of the glaze and the clay got stuck on the kiln cookie. and then it's a little harder to save the piece. Whereas if it clicks off and has no issues, then I can just sand this down with some grinding discs I have made. You can see that how I do that on my Instagram profile. Yeah. Do you have any more questions regarding that? I see one here in Danish. I'm just going to read it just a second. Når du ruller ler ud til kiks, minder du det? Og glatter det på begge sider? Eller er det ikke? There was just a question regarding when I roll out the clay for the kiln cookies, if I compress it on both sides. I tend to compress it on both sides. I don't know whether that's completely necessary. It probably isn't when you compress it on one side and you let it dry in between boards. It probably isn't. But so far I've done it on both sides, so I don't know. Okay, let me just check. So, let me know if you have any specific questions that you'd like me to go through. I know I asked in the Facebook group, and I asked whether you had some questions, and I know that I've missed a few, so please do let me know if there's anything you'd like me to go through here. I have a lot of tests here, and I have a lot of different things, so we can talk about whatever you'd like. So just hit me up in the comment section and I will try to help you as best possible. Another fun way of decorating pieces is also using colored clay. You can use stains to color in your clay and then just use a clear glaze on top, like with this one. There's a question here. How long would you dip in honey flux dipping glaze to get the same results as 3 layers of the brush on version? Is it equivalent? I don't know. That's the I honestly I've never tried the dipping version of honey flux, so I have no idea. I wish I did, but I don't. Sorry. But test it on a test tile. See how far you need to go. In my experience with honey flux, you actually often don't need to apply 3 layers on top of another glaze to get that honey flux effect. 1 or 2 layers is often efficient, but that's just my experience. Okay. Or another glaze. Well, dipping times depends on the glaze, and it also depends on your bisqueware. So if you have a bisque-fired piece, but a piece that is very thick, then it will suck up a lot more glaze a lot faster than if you have a thin piece. Because a bisque-fired piece acts like a sponge. So if the sponge is bigger, then it will suck up more moisture faster. So it depends on your style as well. It also depends on the, what do you call that? I'm just going to go with the phrase, the thickness of your glaze, because I can't recall the English term of it. But if your glaze particles are packed in a dipping glaze that has less water and more concentration of the glaze minerals, or the minerals, then you need to do a quicker dip than if it is a thinner glaze. Then you need a longer dip. So it comes down to testing, I'm afraid, and getting to know the glazes. For instance, my copper green is there, it's sufficient with a 1 or 2 second dip, whereas my peppermint glaze, well, I can dip that for, I don't know, 4, 5, 7 seconds, no issue whatsoever. So it depends, but getting to know your glazes, working with them, testing them, and doing little test tiles where you test a quick dip, so a 1-2 second dip, and then doing maybe a 4 second dip here at the bottom. That tells you a lot about how your glaze will behave and how fast you need to go. You just need to be systematic and always do a 2 second dip and always do a 5 second dip, or whatever you decide. If you do that all the time, then you get an idea of how long you need to dip your pieces. Yeah. Do you have any more questions right now? Otherwise, I would like to just take a second to talk to you about something that I've made. And I want to let you know that if you stick with me here till the end of the live, then there will be a little goodie for you. There will be a little ebook, if you will, of how to make your own glazes out of minerals. And there's going to be a recipe for a white rutile glaze, and where I added some colorants to it, and it's this glaze. And you can add stains or oxides to it, and then you can personalize the glaze to make it all the different colors, but then still have this effect in the glaze, which I find is really, really neat. Yeah, so in the file, then you'll get some knowledge about which stains you need to use in order to get which colors, or not stains, oxides. So for instance, copper green or copper oxide gives you mostly green glazes, and it's all in there. And then also you can use stains as well, but there's a percentage of stains, or how much you need to add of cobalt, or how much you need to add of different oxides or different stains to obtain different looks. Sometimes when using stains, some know them as mason stains, others call them universal colors, or many names for those. But sometimes when using stains, they can make the glaze look a little plastic. So I put in there how many percentages you can do of the different materials in a glaze to still get a nice glaze. And then of course adding more and more of a mineral or an oxide will change the color. Here I added, I think it was 5, or I don't know what it says here, 2% copper oxide to a white glaze, a white crystal glaze. But I could go higher, and then it would be more intensely green, and so on. Yeah, so that's at the end. But before we go to that, and there's also going to be competition, but before that, I'd like to just take a few minutes to introduce you to something I have been working on for a while. I've launched it once on a sale before, and I'm doing it again. So from tonight, I will be doing a special sale on my glazing masterclass. It's a class where I'll teach you a lot about troubleshooting. So we'll go through things like how to prevent pinholes, or at least how to diminish the risk of pinholes, and what to do when you have issues with pinholes, and how to determine what to change in order to minimize the risk of them occurring again, and how and why this glaze flaw, crawling, why it comes, and what you can do to prevent it from coming, and how you can actually save a piece like this if it has already crawled, because you can often actually save pieces like this. This is a great example of a piece that was completely like this, but I managed to salvage this piece. We will also, in the course, you will learn how to save runny pieces that got fused with kiln cookies. You will learn about glaze application flaws. So for instance, this, where you see it's not perfect on the inside, then how do you avoid this from happening? And also, what can you do with a glaze if the glaze cracks after you've applied it? And what does that tell you? Can you actually fire the piece when it has a cracked glaze? Well, sometimes you can. Sometimes it's not a good idea. I go through that in the course. I go through the secret to perfect glaze results with Butz glazes, with brush-on glazes, and with working with the effect glaze Butz Plus. Because sometimes when using Butz Plus, then the glaze will crack or it will run too much. And if it cracks, then there's the issue with food safety. But if you know exactly how to work with Butz Plus, then you can get amazing glaze results like this, where it's just smooth all the way and it creates these cool effects. We'll go through how to work with that, and I'll also show a ton of different glazing methods. So how to get one glaze on the inside and another one on the outside. If you want a, let me see if I have a piece here. Nope. So if you want like a sharp glaze line in between those two glazes, or whether you want the glazes to melt into each other and create nice fun effects on the inside, for instance here. And I show you how to glaze bigger pieces using dipping glazes, how to mix a dipping glaze if you've never done that before, and I show you different techniques for glazing with brush-on glazes, and so on. I also show you something, you also get to see a lot about different techniques you can use when using underglaze or ingobes, and you learn how to stop guessing when glazing. So we'll go through all the troubleshooting problems that glazes can have, and we will create a lot of different glaze combinations that you can test at home. You don't need to have the same materials in order to get something out of following along this glaze course. We can just work with the glazes you have yourself, and you will get to learn or get to know your own glazes and the limitations a lot more. So you will just learn glaze behavior and how to improve your glazing and get the glazes that you dream of. In the glazing masterclass, there's unlimited lifetime access to more than 4 hours of training videos and tutorials. You'll get access to sparring with me for 16 weeks, so you can send me all the questions you have and I will help you from the sidelines. There's also going to be one one-on-one session where we meet up live via Skype or Teams or whatever, and then we can go through all the challenges or all the things that you're curious about, and I will help you personally. Yeah. and I'll teach you my method of keeping track of your glazes and building a glaze library, so that you never get to that glaze day and see that piece that you've been working on for so long and not daring to glaze it because you're afraid the glaze will actually ruin the piece. So my aim with the class is to give you the skills so that you never have to be in that situation, and you having a big library of glazes that you can go to for inspiration when having to choose a new glaze design. After this live is done, then I will open the sale of my glazing course, and for everyone you will have a 50% discount on the course, and for everyone in my Patreon or Instagram membership club, then there's an additional 10%, so they will get 60% on the course. And well, if you're a member, it's about 50 krona, so about a cup of coffee every month. Yeah, but that's if you're part of my membership club. And for tonight, for everyone listening in today, there's an additional 10% off with the code LIVE10. So if you use the discount code LIVE10, then you get 60% just like the members of my club. And if you're unsure whether this course is the right thing for you, and you're thinking, well, I'm a complete new beginner, or I don't know, whatever you might have of thoughts, then just reach out and we can go through. We can just do a short phone call, and I can give you a bit of sparring whether this course would be something that would be right for you or not. Yeah, I'm here to help, so just send me a message if that is something you're interested in. You might have questions, so we can just go through that. Yeah, and if you're not interested at all, then don't worry. It's not. Then there's no hard feelings at all. I just wanted to take a few minutes to actually introduce you to my little darling, and something I'm quite proud of and that I've been working on, and I've already had some people through the course, and it's been very, very interesting, and they've really improved in great ways, and I would love to see you in there, basically. So now we've come to the part. I've shown you everything here, and I have now come to the part where you can actually win one of my clay and glaze experiment ebooks. So from the course I've created a lot of ebooks that are in there, and one of them is my clay and glaze journal, clay and glaze experiments, where I teach you exactly how to recreate all of the designs. And if you write a comment here in the comment section, then I will tonight pick out one person that gets to get a copy of this clay and glaze experiment book, and it has a retail value of 100 euros. So just put in a comment, say that you want to participate, and then I will choose a winner tonight. Thank you for sticking with me here in the live. I hope I saw all of your questions and got around to them. If not, then just shoot me a message and I will try to help you afterwards. So thanks for sticking with me to the end. If you write a comment here saying you'd like a copy of my white rutile recipe and the guide to using stains and oxides, then send me a comment here and I will send it your way. Thank you. Have a nice evening. Bye guys.